September 18th, 1939. Dawn's first pale light seeped across the rolling fields near Pociecha, painting everything in muted gold. Section Commander Edmund Roman Orlik sat rigid in his TKS tankette's cramped driver's seat, scanning the horizon through the periscope slit. Beside him, Gunner Sergeant Josef Jazio Kowalski kept one hand on the 20mm autocannon's breech and the other clutching a worn photograph of his young fiancée. In the narrow bustle, radio operator Corporal Marek Wojcik adjusted the crackling handset, fingers tremulous with anticipation. They had been dispatched at first light to scout for German armor after reports of Panzer activity. The TKS, ordinarily a two-man machine-gun-armed scout, was Orlik's personal modification, a sleek, fragile vessel bristling with a high-velocity autocannon capable of spitting 5 rounds in under a second. It was a David sling in steel form, slender enough to vanish behind hedgerows but powerful enough to punch through light armor. Orlik signaled. Forward. The 3 tankettes rumbled in loose formation, their tracks whispering across damp earth. Every foot they gained felt like a challenge to fate. Could these pint-sized hunters truly match the Wehrmacht's juggernauts? Above them, storks wheeled in lazy circles. Villagers already fled toward the forest's edge, wagons piled high with blankets and livestock, eyes shadowed by fear. As they closed in on a marshland copse, Jazio froze. Sir tracks. He pointed to a line of deep gouges cutting the soil, too wide for a TKS, too regular for infantry. Orlik's jaw tightened. Panzer, he murmured. Panzer tracks. Marek's radio burst to life with static in a distant, urgent voice. Orlik, fall back to regimental HQ. Enemy spearhead advancing. Orlik hesitated. Retreat meant abandoning the farmers and families ahead. Pursue meant courting destruction. He glanced at his 2 men. Jazio's knuckles were white, Marek's eyes bright with resolve. We press on, he ordered. Engines hummed, hearts pounded, and together they plunged into the shimmering heat haze, chasing shadows to the east, unaware that the greatest beast on the Polish battlefield was already waiting. Under the high, pale sun, the TKS trio threaded through fields of thigh-high corn. The stalks whispered in the breeze, hiding them from distant observers, but also cloaking unseen dangers. Orlik steered with calm precision, his mind methodical. Watch, wait, and strike when the moment was right. At the rear, Marek keyed the radio intermittently, but each call was swallowed by static. No reply, he muttered, frustration creasing his brow. Jazio peered to the periscope, sweeping left and right. Something's not right, he said, voice low. These fields, I feel we're being led. Orlik paused the lead tankette behind a low earthen ridge. Ambush protocol, he ordered. Jazio checked his autocannon's ammunition. 3 full clips, 15 rounds, and a handful of spares. If they hit us, we're done, Jazio whispered, sweat beading on his temple. Time stretched. A distant rumble tremored through the soil. Birds erupted from the corn in a white flash panic. Orlik's grip tightened. Eyes up. Jazio scanned again, then let out a strangled exclamation. Tracks. Fresh tread, straight this way. He angled the periscope toward a hollow path between fields. They followed. Engines hushed into idle. The stalks closed around them, confining and ominous. Orlik's voice dropped. Stay ready. Suddenly, the ground shuddered as if something colossal had crawled nearby. A stifled scream from Marek betrayed an involuntary shudder. Then, silence. Too perfect. The 3 tankettes formed a staggered V, creeping forward until the world exploded in fire and metal. German reconnaissance troops emerged, rifles raised, machine guns rattling. Shots sprayed the TKS's flank. Sparks flew as rounds ricocheted off the thin armor. Jazio spun the turret, unleashing a blistering 5-round burst that ripped through the ambushers' cover, sending them scattering. Smoke and confusion reigned. Orlik barked orders, and the tankettes darted back to the ridge, weaving between shell craters and broken fence posts. As they regrouped, Marek finally made a breakthrough on the radio, a brief, static-filled voice confirming enemy armor advancing on Podgorze, a village only miles north. Orlik watched the cornfields with narrowed eyes. They want us to run north, he said. But that's exactly where we'll strike. With resolve stealing their nerves, the 3 tankettes turned westward, toward the source of the greatest threat. By late afternoon, shadow-long jets of sunlight pierced the clouds, illuminating a wide clearing. Orlik felt his pulse quicken as he raised the periscope. There, cresting the rise, rolled the formidable silhouette of Panzer IV-B, its boxy turret, thick frontal armor, and imposing 75mm gun made the most feared ironclad on the front. Jazio's hand shook as he loaded the autocannon's next clip. "Sir, that thing could squash us like bugs." Merrick scanned the radio for updates, but silence greeted him. "We're on our own." For a moment, time froze. The Panzer's commander scanned the landscape through his own viewport, binoculars glinting in the sun. Below, German infantry regrouped behind its tracks, securing the perimeter. All around, the tense hush of anticipatory dread. Orlik inhaled, tasting sweat and dust. "We know their blind spot under the turret ring," he reminded them. "Stay low and fast." He eased the TKS forward, its track links crunching over broken stones. Jazio's autocannon tracked the Panzer's hull, the muzzle crackling as he fired a probing burst. The rounds pinged harmlessly off the glacis. The Panzer's gun pivoted slowly. Its commander locked eyes with Orlik's crew. A single shot barked from the 75mm, cone of dust and gravel marking a miss. Orlik twisted the steering levers, bringing the tankette parallel to the Panzer's side. He felt the machine shudder with tension. Then all hell broke loose. The Panzer fired again, rounds slamming into the ridge just beside Orlik's TKS, throwing earth over the crew. Jazio retaliated with a kill shot aimed at the turret ring. Sparks flew as the autocannon's shell cracked the turret joint. For an instant, the Panzer shuddered, but it rolled on undeterred. A shell from its machine gun strafed Jazio's hatch. Bursts of steel chased by acrid smoke. He cursed, blood trickling from a graze on his brow, and yanked back on the breech handle, emptying the remaining rounds in a lightning salvo. The Panzer twisted its turret, gun dull as it tracked the fleeing tankette. Orlik gunned the engine, weaving through the shattered clearing. Behind him, Jazio and Merrick exchanged wide-eyed glances. "We can't go toe-to-toe," Merrick panted. Orlik nodded. "Then we don't. We disappear and strike again, smarter." With adrenaline burning bright, they retreated into folds of the countryside, battered, unbroken, and more determined than ever. Night fell like a shroud, blotting out the panorama, an inky violet. The 3 TKS tankettes assembled at the edge of a ruined barn, its half-collapsed beams creating an improvised cover. Orlik leaned against the steel hull, rifle slung, and listened to the world's heartbeat. Distant artillery, a lone owl's cry, and the ragged breathing of his crew. Jazio inspected the autocannon. 1 clip left. "That's it," he said, voice tight. "Only 5 shots." Merrick tapped the radio again. "Nothing. Silence," he reported. "HQ ghosted us." Orlik's jaw hardened. "Then we create our own signal. We'll draw them in." He pulled out a flare gun and handed it to Merrick. "When I say now, fire into the air." Jazio groaned. "We're luring a Panzer into our trap with insect lanterns?" He rubbed the side of his head where the graze wept blood. "You're a madman, sir." Orlik met his gaze. "Madness is what keeps men alive. They expect shock and awe from giant guns. They won't expect tiny shadows dancing at midnight." As the moon rose, the 3 climbed into the TKS. Orlik revved the engine. It coughed, then answered with steady purr. They crept back toward the clearing, headlights off. Merrick cradled the flare gun shell between his fingers. At Orlik's signal, Merrick fired. A scorching red flare arced skyward and blossomed like a dying star against the black vault. Jazio spun the turret, eyes peeled. Moments later, the ground trembled as the Panzer IV-B advanced toward a glow, its silhouette monstrously elegant. The sleeper trap was set. Concealed wires rigged to an explosive charge Orlik had salvaged from a destroyed supply truck. The tankette behind him detoured them, cutting the wires. They were dead. The second tankette lost its bearings in the dark and sped off in panic. Jazio caught his breath. "This is it, sir?" Marek's knuckles whitened on the flare gun. "We adapt," Orlik said. "We fight." Without warning, he rolled forward, headlights on. The Panzer's machine gun barked, the night air splitting with tracer fire. Orlik rammed the TKS into a fallen tree trunk, twisting across the Panzer's path as Jazio aimed the autocannon. Gunshot and silence. The flare's glow dimmed. In the hush, Orlik stared at the battered hull, heart pounding. They had drawn blood, but at what cost? In that moment, beyond the reach of searchlights and orders, 3 men in a tiny steel coffin realized their reckoning was only beginning. Before dawn, shreds of gray light revealed the battered clearing. The TKS stood alone, autocannon scorch mark on the turret, dented armor plating, and no sign of the other 2 tankettes. Orlik stepped onto the turret ring, surveying the silent aftermath. Craters smoldered like wounds in the earth. Behind him, Jazio and Marek emerged from the shadows. Jazio's uniform was smeared with oil and dirt. Marek's face was pale but resolute. "Sir," Marek said, voice hoarse, "we lost them both. One fled, one exploded." Orlik swallowed. "We survive," he said. "That's what matters." He tapped his radio, fingers steady. Against a hiss of static, a voice crackled. "Commander Orlik, this is Warsaw. You're ordered to withdraw immediately to Podgorz and await further orders." Orlik closed his eyes. Warsaw's pleas were heartfelt but timid. The army was crumbling, reserves were scattered, and every man counted. Yet the Panzer IV still lurked within striking distance. "Withdraw," he repeated into the microphone. Jazio shook his head. "Sir, if we pull back now, that tank will annihilate every settlement we leave behind." His eyes blazed with righteous fury. "We have the element of surprise." Marek hesitated. "But we're alone, low on ammo, no support. This is madness." He glanced at Orlik, searching for guidance. Orlik looked toward the misty ridge where the Panzer had vanished. He thought of the families who'd fled at dawn, the children too frightened to leave their mother's skirts. Duty was more than obedience to orders. It was protection where others would cower. "Prepare the TKS," he ordered. "We move at first light." Jazio and Marek exchanged a glance, then saluted. There was no joy in their faces, only grim determination, as they worked the cold hours, patching tracks, checking ammunition, rehearsing firing drills. Orlik allowed himself a single moment of doubt, swiftly banished. Leadership meant shouldering fear and forging it into resolve. At sunrise, the little tankette rumbled out of the clearing, its autocannon glinting. Orlik leaned out of the hatch, eyes steely. Behind him lay the debris of failure. Ahead lay a monstrous adversary and the chance to make history. And somewhere in the shattered villages of Poland, hope kindled in 3 men's hearts, trembling but unbroken. Their hunt had only just begun. By mid-morning, the little TKS idled at the dusty edge of Pociecha. The village felt hollow. Doorways stood wide open, footprints scrawled across dirt yards, and the hush was heavy as if the hamlet itself dared not break the silence. Orlik climbed from a hatch, surveying the empty homes with a soldier's practiced eye. Jazio and Marek followed, weapons at the ready, senses taut as bowstrings. A lone elder emerged from a timber cottage, stooped and clutching a ragged shawl. His eyes widened at the sight of the steel hunter. You are the Phantom," he whispered, voice thin as tattered cloth. "The demon tamer." His gaze flicked to the turret. "Our fields, they say he crushes everything." He nodded toward the north trail. "He was here. He took our granary ovens, sank through a fence like a ghost." Orlik crouched to meet him. "We'll stop this beast, sir. Show us where." The elder's gnarled hand trembled as he pointed to a muddy cart path leading into a thicket. Jazio exchanged a glance with Marek. Their quarry was closer than they dared hope. Inside the barn courtyard, they paused. Orlik unfolded a crude map sketched in chalk. An old mill near the marsh, half-ruined stone walls, a perfect ambush site. "We hide in the pool of reeds," he murmured, "and wait for the Panzer to narrow the field." Marek tapped his leg nervously. "We're bleeding villagers dry of hope. If we fail," he didn't finish. His eyes hovered on Orlik's, the unspoken fear that this tiny hunter might become their tomb. Jazio, ever pragmatist, slid a spare clip into his belt. Hope's all we've got, Merrick, and Orlik's cannon. He patted the 20mm breech affectionately. Let's give these farmers something to believe in. By noon, they rumbled north. Fields rippled with tall grass, the sun burning the sweat from their necks. The barn elder's directions proved accurate. An old causeway between the reeds led to a clearing where the mill's skeletal stones loomed. Orlik crouched low in the hull. "Wait until he's within 20 meters, he ordered, voice clipped. "Then Jazio, you fire." The hours dragged. Birds called, but no answer came. The sun dipped mustard yellow, and shadows lengthened. Merrick squared his shoulders. He adjusted the radio wires, trying to boost the signal, but only static greeted him. Just as doubt began to gnaw at their courage, a distant rumble shivered the earth. Orlik raised his periscope. There, snaking between the reeds, came the Panzer 4B. Its tracks carved deep lines, and atop the turret the commander peered through binoculars, as if searching for specters. "Perfect," Orlik whispered. "Hold, hold." The tank lumbered into the kill zone, oblivious to the slender steel snake nestled in the reeds. Jazio's finger caressed the trigger guard. Mark's breath stalled. The moment stretched. Then a twig snapped under the TKS's track. The Panzer's turret spun. "Now!" Orlik snarled. Jazio unleashed a blistering burst. The 5 rounds streaked through the air like meteors, slamming into the Panzer's side armor. Sparks showered as steel met steel, and the massive tank rocked. German soldiers spilled from the rear hull, confusion erupting. But the Panzer's guns spoke in thunder. A shell detonated mere meters away, sending up earth and splinters. The reeds crackled, and Orlik jammed the TKS into reverse. Weaving through the marshes, return fire chased them. In the shoot of sunset, the tiny hunter vanished among the rushes. Behind them, the mill lay silent once more, its echoes carrying the promise of what had just begun. Dawn brought a brittle chill. Orlik guided the TKS through a narrow defile between limestone outcrops, the ground slick with dew. Jazio huddled behind the autocannon, eyes darting. Merrick scanned the horizon, radio poised like a lifeline. Each man carried the weight of yesterday's firefight, hands trembling, hearts pounding. "Stay sharp," Orlik murmured. "They'll strike back." The cornfields had become a graveyard of stalks and splintered fence posts, a testament to the Panzer's wrath. Now they marched into denser terrain. The woodland canopies swallowed the morning light. The silence was oppressive. No bird sang, no squirrel scurried. Only the hum of the TKS's engine echoed. Suddenly, a cascade of rifle fire cracked from both sides of the track. Bullets pinged off the thin armor, ricocheting like pebbles in a stream. The tankette shuddered. "Ambush!" Jazio shouted, swinging the turret. Orlik jammed the throttle, spinning the hull to bring the autocannon to bear. 5 rounds spat from the breech, cutting down German reconnaissance troops hidden behind oak trunks. But more appeared, machine gun nests peppered with firing slits carved from stone outcroppings. The TKS lurched under the hailstorm of bullets. Orlik cursed, slamming levers to duck behind a fallen tree trunk. Splinters rained across the hull. "Return fire," he roared. Jazio obeyed, tracing the tracer lines to cluster gun ports. The 20mm shells punched through moss and mortar, sending defenders reeling. Merrick wrestled the steering until the TKS clattered forward, wheels screeching against hidden roots. The carnage intensified. Germans poured out from concealed trenches, grenades arcing toward the tankette. Orlik seized his revolver, popped the hatch, and discharged 6 blazing rounds, an infantry squad rushing to him. His aim was true. 3 figures slumped. A grenade slammed the side armor, and Orlik tossed himself inside as fragmentation rattled the hull. Smoke choked the compartment. Jazio coughed. "We're pinned." Merrick lay smoke. Orlik barked. Flu-right grenades rattled across the floor. Merrick yanked a pin and tossed the canister out the hatch. Within seconds, the clearing turned to swirling gray-white. Bullets embedded in the tree trunks glinted like angry eyes. Cloaked by the haze, Orlik gunned the engine, and they burst through the brush, tires tearing at slender saplings. The wood seemed to explode behind them. Grenades bloomed in clouds of dirt, but the TKS surged forward, track chains chewing through undergrowth. They emerged at the outskirts of a shallow ravine. As the smoke cleared, Orlik peered back. The German ambushers were regrouping, but too late. The tiny hunter had slipped free. Jazio exhaled. That was too close. Merrick wiped sweat from his brow. Supplies? Orlik checked the ammo racks. Only 2 clips remained. We're running out. He surveyed the ravine below, footprints trailing off toward a ruined barn on the far side. They want us to follow. Let's hope their invitation is worth the cost. In the quiet aftermath, the 3 men, bloody but unbowed, drove toward the unknown, each bearing the marks of an ambush and the resolve to survive the next. Night draped the Polish countryside in velvet black. The moon a pale sliver overhead. The TKS rested in a hollow beneath a gnarled oak, engine silent. The 3 men sat on overturned crates beside the tankette, sharing stale bread and lukewarm water. Jazio probed his wound with a trembling hand, a long scratch from shrapnel. He winced. Nothing deep, but it burns. Merrick cleaned his radio gear with careful precision, muttering words of apology as he untangled wires. Orlik lay back on the crates, eyes on the heavens. Remember the night games, he said softly. As kids, running through fields in the dark, pretending to be knights. The memory glowed in his voice, an ember of innocence before war's furnace. Jazio managed a grin. Except our swords were sticks, and our foes were each other. He winced again, quickly masking the pain. Seems a lifetime ago. Merrick paused, slider in hand. They say the Germans call you the Phantom. Some legend of a tank hunter that appears at twilight, strikes, then vanishes. He glanced at Orlik. What do they see when they see you? Orlik inhaled. A man who won't abandon his people. His stare hardened. We fight not for glory, but to protect those who can't protect themselves. Silence fell, punctuated only by the soft rustle of leaves. Then a distant cry, wild, unearthly, drifted through the trees. The men froze. What was that? Jazio whispered. Wolves, Merrick ventured. Hunger drives them close to camps. Orlik frowned. Stay sharp. He slid off the crate, patrolling the perimeter. The TKS's headlight jackshaft glinted in his hand like a cold eye. Minutes later, Orlik returned, rifle cradled. Nothing, but pack animals travel in groups. He knelt, pointing to large paw prints in the soft soil. Jazio shuddered. This night it feels alive. Merrick stood. Sleep, while you can. They bedded down in the cramped bustle of the tankette, gear arranged as makeshift pillows. Orlik kept the hatch cracked, rifle within arm's reach. As sleep claimed him in waves of exhaustion, Merrick dreamed of home. Family laughed around a dinner table. Jazio dreamed of his fiancée's smile. Orlik's thoughts roamed elsewhere. The Panzer IV's cold steel belly, the next ambush, and the fragile line between hunter and hunted. He willed the night to stretch, to buy them a few more hours of peace. But darkness is a fickle ally. Beyond the hull, shapes stirred. Soft footprint on the earth, whispers on the wind. The TKS's little heart ticked in the gloom, awaiting dawn's cruel verdict. First light bled into the sky, turning tendrils of mist into rose-colored clouds. The TKS rolled out of its hiding place, tracks muffled by the soft earth. Orlik led the way toward the ruined barn, Jazio at the autocannon, Merrick monitoring the radio for false hope. A figure stood in the doorway, the farmer who had pointed them north days before. He lifted a hand in greeting, but didn't move. Orlik halted the tankette. "Good morning," he called. "Are you all right?" The farmer's eyes darted. They know you're here," he stammered. "They plan to trap you. The Panzer and infantry." His voice cracked. "It was my deal." Jazio's face strained. "You sold us out? After everything?" Merrick leveled his rifle at the man. "Stand back." He motioned to Orlik. Orlik swung down onto the mud-churned ground. "Why?" His tone was cold as steel. "You asked for protection in exchange for intel. We gave you hope." The farmer collapsed to his knees. "I had no choice. They threatened my family. They said they'd kill them if I didn't guide you right into their ambush." Orlik's jaw clenched. Where are they? The farmer pointed toward a poplar grove beyond the barn. They wait at the far edge. Jazio spat. A dirty trick. He racked the autocannon's bolt. We should kill him. Merrick hesitated, rifling through his conscience. If we do, we lose any moral high ground. What makes us different? Orlik studied the farmer's trembling form. War twisted men into monsters, but vengeance would twist them further. He nodded. Tell us exactly where. As they prepared the TKS for yet another attack, Merrick bound the farmer's hands behind him. Seat him in the cramped bustle. The old man sobbed, head bowed. Jazio reloaded the autocannon, 5 fresh rounds gleaming. Orlik climbed into the hatch. We'll use him as bait, he announced. When the Germans swarm, we'll follow his tracks to their flank. The plan was cruel, but born of necessity. The farmer, a man broken by fear, would lead them straight through enemy lines. As the tankette rumbled toward the grove, Orlik felt the bitter tang of betrayal mix with steely resolve. War asked for cruel choices, and he would be ruthless if needed. In the lull before conflict, Merrick whispered a prayer for the farmer's soul. Jazio checked his ammunition again, though they all knew it wasn't enough. Orlik gripped the hatch rim, heart pounding. The grove's dark line drew closer. Somewhere within its shadows, the Panzer stalked. And closer still, the farmer waited to deliver his final act of betrayal or redemption. The trap was set, and dawn's fragile light offered no mercy. They emerged from the poplar shadows into a ruined courtyard. Stone walls half collapsed, weeds clawing through cracks. The farmer rose, breath hitching, and led them to a low embankment where sandbags formed makeshift firing positions. Beyond, the field sloped into a wide hollow. Orlik peered over the top. Trace lines glinted in the early sun, machine gun nests, at rifles braced on tripods, and infantry foxholes bristling with bayonets. My lads are ready, the farmer said, voice barely a whisper. Orlik exhaled. Hold, he ordered Merrick and Jazio. He swung down and frisked the man, retrieving a map detailing minefields and MG ranges. The betrayal would cost dearly, but this information might save them all. Back in the hatch, Orlik relayed the intel. They've mined the approaches. We need a gap. Jazio frowned. We don't have explosives to clear mines. Merrick adjusted his headset. Maybe we can lure the infantry away, then dash through. He tapped his radio. I'm trying HQ again. Orlik silenced him with a gesture. They were on their own. Orlik considered the fields of steel and earth. We'll create our own gap. Jazio, you draw their fire. He handed him the last flare. I'll circle to the west and strike the flank. Merrick, keep us in radio silence until I give the word. Jazio's hands trembled as he loaded the flare gun. This could kill us faster. His eyes met Orlik's. But if it works, maybe it kills the beast. The TKS rolled forward, headlights cut low. Jazio fired the flare high. Red light bathed the courtyard. Immediately, machine guns cracked and muzzle flashes dotted the walls. Dust plumed as bullets ripped through cover. The infantry surged toward the embankment. Orlik rammed the wheel, sending the TKS slewing westward. He navigated around mine markers etched in the soil. The ground felt alive. Every tremor under the tracks could be a buried bomb. Jazio's autocannon was silent, conserving rounds. As the Panzer IV lumbered into view on the crest beyond, Orlik recognized the moment. He choked off the engine and watched the massive steel hulk skirt the infantry. Shells barked at Jazio's decoy, and the Germans fired into the haze of night-glow dust. Their attention was fixed entirely on the tiny tankette at the center of the trap. Orlik gunned the engine, roaring across the failed minefield toward the Panzer's flanks. His heart thundered in time with the engine's roar. Each meter closed the gap between hunter and beast. 300 meters. 200, the autocannon's muzzle glimmered. At 70 meters, Jazio opened fire again. 2 quick bursts ripping across the Panzer's side. Sparks flew. The enemy commander cursed into his headset. Orlik jammed the TKS against a shallow embankment, offering the smallest target. He popped the hatch and poured rounds into the turret ring at point-blank range. The autocannon's roar filled the night. Armor plates groaned, and steel shards spat into the air. The Panzer rocked. Its 75mm gun spun to bear, but couldn't swivel fast enough. Before it could fire, Orlik rammed the hull into the Panzer's treads, wrenching forward. Metal screeched. Jazio hammered the breech for one final clip. In the aftermath, the Panzer's engine stuttered. Smoke rose from its turret ring like a wounded beast's breath. As Orlik and Jazio fired the last rounds, Merrick scrambled to keep the makeshift tractor engine idling. When the echoes died, the courtyard lay silent. The infantry froze in place. Orlik slid from the hatch, rifle ready. He surveyed the wrecked flank. Tracks twisted, turret jammed. The beast was wounded. But before he could celebrate, a fresh rumble shook the compound. Soviet tanks, their red stars gleaming under flares, rolled into view. Orlik's blood ran cold. The trap had ensnared more than the Panzer. He turned to Jazio and Merrick, faces lit by flickering fires. "We've made history," he said quietly, "but our war is just beginning." As the twin threats closed, 3 men and a battered tank hunter steeled themselves for the next chapter, unscripted and unforgiving. Late morning sun filtered through ragged clouds as Orlik guided the battered TKS along a narrow ford. The shallow stream's cold water splashed against the running gear, track links churning mud into frothy eddies. Jazio leaned forward in the turret, scanning both banks for snipers. Merrick stood at the hatch, radio scrunch in one hand, binoculars in the other. Their destination lay just beyond the opposite bank, a battered German supply truck abandoned at a road junction 2 kilometers east. Intelligence whispered of extra 20mm rounds stashed in the back, precious lifeblood for a dwindling arsenal. Orlik's plan was simple: seize the cache, then vanish before reinforcements arrived. The TKS lurched across the stream bed, water sluicing into the bustle. Underneath, mossy stones threatened to stall them. Orlik eased back on the throttle until a juddering shudder told him they were past the worst. The tankette clambered up the opposite bank with a groaning protest. "Clear," Jazio reported. He wiped spray from the periscope. Merrick swept the tree line. "No movement. No sign of enemy yet," he said. "But we're exposed on that road." Orlik nodded. "We'll use the trees as cover. Keep your heads low." He drove forward, TKS mirrors flanking them with shattered glass and twisted steel. In the distance, the supply truck's metal sides glinted like a mirage, and so did the edge of the prisoner's blood-stained shirt draped over the tailgate. They stopped 50 meters away. Orlik swung down from the hatch, rifle slung across his back. Jazio slipped out as well, clutching a satchel. Merrick followed with the radio. The 3 crept forward, feet silent on the soft earth. Orlik recalled how, as a boy, he'd stalk hares in the same woods. This hunt carried more weight than any rabbit chase. At the truck, they found it looted of food but half full of 20mm rounds. Merrick began transferring boxes into canvas bags. Jazio rifled to the cab and recoiled. A wounded German corporal lay slumped in the driver's seat, clutching a canteen. His eyes opened briefly, wild with fever. Orlik approached. "Hold your fire," he said, voice low. "He's unarmed." The corporal croaked for water. Merrick handed the canteen across. The man took a swig, eyes fluttering. In his pocket, a photograph of a young daughter stared back at Orlik. "A man," Orlik said softly, "like us." He lifted the corporal from the seat and carried him to the TKS bustle. Jazio loaded the last crate of ammunition. "We can't take him," Jazio protested. "He'll betray us." Merrick met Orlik's gaze. "If we leave him, he dies here." Orlik nodded, recalling the mercy he once received after a training accident. "Tie him in the hull," he ordered. "Keep him alive." With the ammo secured, the TKS reversed into the trees. As they slipped away, Orlik glanced at the wounded corporal's face, contorted in pain but relieved. The line between hunter and hunted blurred in that moment. They had become protectors as well as predators, and with fresh rounds in their racks, the tiny steel hunter rumbled onward toward its next trial. Twilight descended as the TKS crawled along a pockmarked road. Merrick fussed with bandages and rations, tending to the German corporal's wounds through the open bustle hatch. The corporal, Otto Meyer, grown with high fever and thirst, his uniform stiff with dry blood. Jazio loaded the fresh 20mm rounds into the autocannon magazine, each metallic click echoing in the half-lit compartment. "We're down to 2 clips again," he muttered, "and the Soviets are closing in." Orlik clasped a hand on Jazio's shoulder. "We survive on these rounds," he said quietly, "and we survive by remembering our humanity." His gaze drifted to Otto. "What's your story, Meyer?" Otto's breathing rattled. "Husband, father," he rasped. "Captured Polish villagers, orders, kill them." He choked, tears mingling with sweat. "I refused." Marek's eyes narrowed. "You refused orders and they shot you?" he asked. Otto nodded, blood staining his sleeve, "then left me for dead." Jazio frowned. "So he's the same as us, stalemate forced by conscience." He hesitated. "Do we trust him?" Orlik eyed the corporal. Trust is earned by actions, not words. He climbed from the hatch, rifle in hand, and signaled Marek. Together, they raised Otto's head so he could drink water. As Otto drank, Marek replaced crusted bandages. Night deepened. Only the TKS's engine humming broke the silence. Orlik stood outside, lit by a single headlamp. He remembered his own father's mercy during the 1920 border skirmish, how sparing an enemy soldier saved their unit from reprisal. Inside the bustle, Jazio studied the autocannon sight. "We could leave him in a village ahead," he said, "but that might doom civilians." Marek's jaw clenched. "Or hand him over to the Soviets." He spat. "What then?" Orlik retreated into thought. Mercy was a seed in hostile soil. Yet if they abandoned Otto, they became killers of mercy. At dawn they would decide. Suddenly, radio static crackled to life. A voice, a Polish scout, cried, "Tankette spotted near Radoslaw. Soviet trucks approaching from the east." The line went dead. Orlik's eyes sharpened. We're between 2 wolves. He slipped inside, sliding into the driver's seat. Marek, ready to hatch. Jazio clambered on top of the bustle, rifle trained on the tree line. "If those scouts fire, we engage." He loaded the autocannon. Through the dusk-lit woods, distant engines roared. Otto's labored breathing filled the bustle. Orlik checked his revolver, heart pounding. Mercy had drawn an oath. Protect the wounded even as the world hunts them. And when dawn broke, they would honor that oath, even if it cost them their last chance at survival. A lurid red dawn cast the world in bruised hues. The Soviets advanced in loose formation. T-20XS and BA, 10 armored cars rumbling toward the TKS's position. Polish scouts, 3 battered tankettes, were pinned against a low ridge. Their radio crackled static rifle pleas for support. Orlik weighed the risks. If he stayed hidden, the scouts would be overrun. If he revealed himself, the Soviets would converge on his lone TKS, and Otto Meyer strapped within. The choice was simple. One small act of defiance could save dozens. He ordered Marek to prepare the signal fire. Nearby lay an abandoned homestead stash of oil drums. Marek eyed him. "This will paint a target," he warned. Orlik nodded. "We'll lure the Soviets off the scout's ridge." He stepped out, rifle in hand, and doused the drum with accelerant. Jazio rumbled to his position atop the bustle, scanning for the Soviets. He spied 3 T-26 silhouettes edging into view. "They see us," he whispered. Orlik seized a match, struck it, and tossed the blazing stick into the oil. A fireball erupted, casting flickering shadows on shattered walls. Instantly, Soviet crews abandoned their vehicles, wheeling machine guns toward the blaze. The scouts seized the chance. Their tankettes roared to life, rolling down the slope to flank the Soviets. The TKS slipped away in the opposite direction, tracks ringing crimson light on the wreckage. Marek keyed the radio. "Polish scouts, push north. I'll lead the Soviets away." His message cut through static. The Soviets, fixated on Inferno, rumbled after the TKS, engine roar swallowed by the firestorm's crackle. For 5 tense minutes, Orlik lured the armored cars down a twisting back road. German Corporal Otto moaned in the bustle, racked by chills. Marek tended to him, murmuring soothing words. Jazio kept the autocannon trained on any crossing path. Just as a threat seemed imminent, Orlik spat to one side and veered sharply into a concealed ravine. The Soviets hesitated, unsure of the route. Merrick hit the radio again. "Scouts, regroup at the crossroads." His voice trembled, but command rang clear. A final TKS burst of speed reversed the Soviets' advance. Confused, the T-26s pulled back to avoid ambush. Within minutes, the scouts arrived, 3 battered tankettes bristling with Polish flags. Their commander saluted Orlik's TKS, their gratitude wordless yet profound. As the sun broke free from cloud, Orlik exhaled. They had saved comrades with nothing but a burning barrel and quick wits. But he knew this triumph was fleeting. Enemy steel still stalked the land, and Otto Meyer's fate inched closer. Yet for the first time in days, the world felt slightly more certain. Small fires could change the course of war. The lines between hunter and hunted blurred again as taste of victory faded. Orlik convened with the scout commanders, Lieutenant Banaszak and Sergeant Kimura, around a makeshift table in a ruined schoolhouse. Maps lay spread, German positions to the west, Soviet columns to the east, and their fragile corridor through between. Lieutenant Helena Kowalczyk's name surfaced when Banaszak spoke of a reconnaissance specialist whose daring raids had earned her renown and fear from both sides. Rumors whispered she'd once disabled an entire Panzer platoon with nothing but a bicycle and satirical leaflets. Orlik raised an eyebrow. "A prankster-turned-soldier?" he asked. The scouts nodded. "She's our best chance to misdirect the Germans on the next strike." Orlik recalled their earlier radio chatter from Helena, a crisp, confident voice and intel on the Panzer 4B's patrols. Yet something had felt off. Her data always came just moments too late, almost as if feeding the enemy. Now, with the German flank exposed, Orlik proposed a new ruse. Fake orders to attack at dawn, broadcast from Helena's channel, while the TKS crept in from the south. Kimura leaned forward. "We'll plant the decoy demolition charges, broadcast the false assault times, then pull back. You slip in at 0300 hours. Orlik's mind raced. And if Kowalczyk's compromised? He fixed Merrick with a steady look. "Radio silence on our channel. We'll use personal codes." Merrick nodded, careful, disciplined, suspicious. As the meeting broke, Orlik stepped into the courtyard. The wind carried the distant rumble of artillery. He considered Helena. Was she ally or enemy? His instincts told him to trust, but experience demanded doubt. That night, he crept to the radio shack. Under feeble lamplight, he studied Helena's last transmission. Coordinates, timings, and a mocking final line, "Catch them if you can." A hidden grin seemed echo in the static. Orlik clenched his fist. "A test," he murmured. He typed a coded reply. "Operation Nightingale confirmed." The words felt like a pact, and perhaps a trap. He returned to the TKS, climbed inside, and found Jazio staring at the autocannon. "What is it, Sergeant?" Orlik asked. Jazio shrugged. "Just thinking, the hunter must sometimes be hunted." He tapped the barrel. "How do we know we're not sitting in someone else's game?" Orlik met his gaze. "By knowing our own rules." He racked the breech, hearing the familiar clank. "Tomorrow, we'll see whose mind is sharper, ours or the one behind the phantom broadcasts." Night conspired around them, heavy with questions. In the hush, Orlik realized the greatest threat might not be steel and bullets. It might be the unseen hand pulling their strings. Before the sun breached the horizon, the TKS crept toward the shattered remains of a 12th century church. Its steeple lay collapsed, stones scattered across overgrown grounds. Moss and ivy strangled once holy walls, creating perfect hideouts for ambush or refuge for the hunter. Orlik parked 50 meters from the nave skeleton and signaled Jazio and Merrick out. They dusted themselves on a cold stone floor, maps and demolition charges in hand. The dusk air carried an eerie calm, too quiet, as though the world held its breath. Orlik traced his finger along Helena's coordinates. Machine gun nests hidden among toppled pews, German infantry bivouacked in the choir loft. His plan: detonate charges at each entrance at dawn, lure defenders outside, and circle in with the TKS to strike their vulnerable flanks. They worked in silence, rigging plastic explosives and laying wires. As Orlik had feared, the layout matched Helena's intel with uncanny precision. His jaw clenched. She'd given them accurate information, but was that betrayal or simply brilliant reconnaissance? Mark's radio crackled to life. Helena's voice clear. Charges set. Withdrawal tunnel coordinates to the South Passage. German patrols rotate every 15 minutes. Orlik's teeth ground together. Her apology at the ring of truth or a well-crafted lie? Jazio gestured to a trapdoor partially buried under debris. This must be it. He pried it open, revealing a narrow corridor dipping into darkness. Perfect exit. He paused. Now what? Orlik nodded. Set the timer for 5 minutes. We detonate, draw them out, and vanish through the tunnel before they regroup. His heart pounded as he tied wires to charges. The old stones whispered above them as if foretelling doom. With one final click, the explosives armed. Merrick keyed his radio. All units stand by for signal. Silence blanketed the church. Orlik crouched by a crumbling pillar, waiting with 3 comrades and 1 wounded prisoner for dawn's first light. At precisely 0515 hours, a muffled boom rattled the rafters, followed by a second and third. Stone dust motes drifted through shattered stained glass. German soldiers thundered out, rifles raised, flashlights bobbing. They fanned into the courtyard, barking orders. Now! Orlik whispered. The TKS's engine stuttered to life outside. Jazio and Merrick vanished down the tunnel. Orlik dragged Otto Meyer after them, guilt pinning his heart. From the shaft, he watched the courtyard flash with muzzle fire as panicked defenders realized the church's collapse was a lure. Then darkness swallowed Orlik. He climbed into the TKS, sliding behind the controls. Jazio reappeared, injecting a final clip into the autocannon. Merrick slammed the hatch shut. Orlik throttled forward. The tunnel spat them out beyond the churchyard, and they tore away like ghosts on steel. Seconds later, the church's courtyard erupted in chaos. German orders swallowed by confusion. Above, birds scattered in the purple dawn. The TKS's exhaust trailed into the sky as 3 men and a grateful prisoner escaped their own explosive finale. But as smoke curled from the ruined nave, Orlik realized one truth. In war's twisted mind game, only those who survive the Church of Stones can say they truly hold the key. And their key yet to be tested. The hunt, it seemed, was far from over.